Our prime minister, as we mentioned, meeting with the American president today in Washington. Now, before the sit down, they did speak to media. And when asked about tariffs, Trump says he expects to get there. But when and how, that's still a bit of a mystery. Let's start there with Brian Tobin, vice chair of the Bank of Montreal, former premier of Newfoundland. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleased to be with you.
Donald Trump now at least seems to acknowledge Canada has an interest in keeping the same industries the U.S. is going after. Would you call that progress of sorts?
I would call it progress. You know, I think every Canadian will recall vividly the President Trump in prior meetings saying, we don't need your autos, we don't need your steel, we don't need your aluminum, we don't need your copper, we don't need anything that Canada has to offer. We heard none of that rhetorical commentary from Mr. Trump today. And I think it signals that there has been some progress behind the scenes in the various negotiations that Minister Dominic LeBlanc, the industry minister, Joly, the foreign minister, Anita Anand, and others have been doing for some period of time. So as you know, you and I are chatting before we get a full debrief on what happened today, a public comment from Minister LeBlanc. But clearly the tone today was extremely positive. I don't think I've ever heard the President of the United States, President Trump, ever be more flattering toward a fellow leader than he was today in dealing with Mark Carney. So I am hopeful, but I think as is warranted, and any time you're dealing with the United States and with President Trump, I'm cautious. We'll see what happens.
So we should manage our expectations.
I think we always should manage our expectations, but I am feeling more hopeful than I have felt in some time. I think what's important for Canadians to remember always is the job of the government, first and foremost, is do no harm. Even though we're being harmed with respect to steel, aluminum, and a number of other areas, the fact of the matter is we still have the very best trade deal of any country in the world with the United States. 85% of everything we produce goes into the U.S. tariff-free. We don't want to mess with that. We want to protect that at all costs. So it's important the government take the time, whatever amount of time is necessary, to protect that advantage, and at the same time to do everything it can to get these tariffs on products like steel and aluminum, et cetera, removed as much as that is possible. But bear in mind, you know, the U.S. is putting tariffs on every single country in the world. Is it realistic to expect that at the end of the day, Canada will be, quote unquote, tariff-free? I think that may be a stretch, and it may be setting an objective for ourselves that we can't quite fulfill. But we've got to get as much pain out of the system as possible. And we got to create as much certainty as we can create as possible. And that's what the government, I think, is advancing again today in Washington.
Okay. Also, the government facing, of course, the new trade deficit number. It widened to $6.3 billion in August. What is your initial take on that number?
I think that is a direct result of what is happening in the trading relationship between Canada and the United States. And I think it's, as BNN would have noted earlier, a few minutes ago before we started our interview, not only is our deficit with the United States, of course, bigger, but the amount of trade coming from the U.S. into Canada has also reduced. So the pain's being felt on both sides. And this is really the message to the United States. There are no winners in this tariff war. U.S. exports to Canada are down. Canadian exports to the United States are down. The number of Canadians traveling to the United States are dramatically down. Nobody wins when we're in a trade dispute, and it's time to get our trade sorted out and come to agreements that we can all live with and that are fair and reasonable in the circumstance.
Let me ask you if you think that there are strengths in this country that we have yet to leverage in these negotiations.
I think we've got leverage, but I think the government, Prime Minister Carney in particular, is doing exactly the right thing. It's easy to take the bait and rise up and make threats and take large retaliatory actions. You may feel good for a few minutes, but that's not what's in the country's best interest. What's in the country's best interest is to settle this thing for the medium and long term for Canada. Canada's not without some weapons if we choose to use them. Doug Ford has been very effective at setting out a long laundry list of things that Canada could do if it needs to make its intentions to get a better deal better understood. That said, it's very helpful that Doug Ford has set out that list, but let's work towards a solution. And my gut is we're getting there. We may not be there today quite yet, but we're making progress, and we should hang on to that progress. It's not a time for grandstanding. It's a time for quiet but effective diplomacy.
It has been raised as a possibility, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, whether moving forward with the negotiations for a trilateral agreement could result in perhaps bilateral agreements which could better serve Canada's purpose. I'm wondering how you feel about the possibility of sort of getting rid of CUSMA and doing just negotiations with Mexico and U.S. on its own.
I think it's too early to say. I think it's a mistake at this stage of the game to sever ourselves from Mexico. I think there's strength in numbers. There's strength in working together. We have similar interest, in particular, for example, in the auto sector. We have a North American, totally integrated auto sector. And I think to announce or to suggest that we're going to go off and do a bilateral deal with the U.S. May, in fact, weaken both our hand and Mexico's hand. And if you're the United States, dealing with us separately may put them in a more powerful position. So for the moment, I would say we should do what Prime Minister Carney recently did, which was to go to Mexico, see the Mexican president, and to make common cause where common cause is appropriate and helpful to both of us.
Brian Tobin, thanks for your time today. Thanks for joining us on The Close. Mr. Tobin's vice chair at the Bank of Montreal, former premier of Newfoundland, and a former cabinet minister as well with the Chretien government.